California has a housing crisis, which we are all aware of, and it's focused a lot on low-income housing, but not entirely. All kinds of housing is needed. And Bob and I happened to attend a Congress of the New Urbanism workshop in Seattle a number of years ago, where we looked at some different types of housing opportunities that could fit some what is now called the missing middle, types of housing that used to exist years ago, but has been zoned out by R1 family zoning almost entirely. So we were inspired when we met Ross on a walking tour through some of the islands in the San Juans, and inspired not only by what he had done, by the people we spoke with and the quality of life that they were experiencing, which is a big part of what living in California is all about, or Washington for that matter. So we thought that his presentation about how we might look at accommodating more varied housing in Humboldt County and California in general would be useful in trying to fit more housing into smaller areas without disturbing the fabric that many of us have grown up with and want to retain. So with that, I will turn this over to Ross. Thank you so much for being with us, all of you speaking, and for Ross for speaking to us. Thank you.
All right, well, I am really honored to be part of this conversation. This has been part of my world and passion for some time. And I am living in a small town on an island north of Seattle. And we have our own slate of issues and challenges that we'll get into. And I believe that there's perhaps some overlap with the planning world down in Northern California and what's possible. What I'm going to do is to explore a background about how I came to pocket neighborhoods and how I'm working with them. You know, before that, let me give a little bit of my own background. I grew up in Minnesota, in a place where my family goes back to the 1890s. My family is still in the same shingled porch-fronted house overlooking a lake, as all houses do, it seems like, in Minnesota. And I grew up in a coherent neighborhood before the automobile age. When I went off to architecture school, around that time, suburban subdivision came out from the Twin Cities, and it swept through, and we went from 3,000 people to 20,000 people in probably 10 or 15 years. And I saw areas that were part of the natural fabric, the agricultural fabric, as well as the town fabric, just completely change. And from my sense, change not for the better. It was automobile dominated, as we all know, and this is across the country. Fast forward, I ended up moving to Langley on Whidbey Island in 1982. And interestingly, it's a small town at the far outskirts of a metropolitan area. And during our time here, suburban sprawl, if you will, or exurban sprawl has begun to come in, and the prices have reflected that. This is not rural, but it is definitely, it's not urban for sure. So I have tried to take on some of the things that were similar to what I was living in and working with back in Minnesota, take it on here. And I have had the opportunity of working with the city planner and on the boards for our town to create a courtyard housing code back in the 1990s. And then I stepped in and became a developer to try to show what this could be. So I'm going to jump into it right now. I will do my best to watch chat, but there'll be a time at the end for Q&A and discussion. I'm going to try to get through this to have enough time. So let me jump in here. I'm going to share my screen. This is a, let's see, share screen.
You can see that.
All right. Is this coming up with the first slide?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Not my notes, it's the main slide.
That is correct.
All right, good. So this is about pocket neighborhoods. What I'm seeing as small scale communities that are nested within larger communities. So I live and work in the outer realms of Seattle up toward Vancouver. This is the outlook from Langley, Washington on the south end of the island. It's idyllic in many ways, but like any place, it has its challenges, especially with affordability. This is a town of about 1,200 people, originally platted around 1900, around a small harbor that was served to export logs and minor agricultural products. It's not on the road to anywhere, which is lovely, but after the logging stopped, the local economy stalled out. It never really picked up. It caters to tourism, but this is not reliable. So while the island has no bridge to the mainland, there is a ferry. And 8 miles away, as the crow flies, it's certainly longer by ferry, the Boeing airline factory builds 787s. We're also within commuting distance of Microsoft and Amazon. So to an extent, it's a bedroom community of Seattle. More recently, fiber optic internet was installed, and there are people coming in, especially during the last couple of years, who are moving to the island who don't have to be located anywhere because they can work remotely. So of course, and of course, the island is attractive to retirees. So with all the money coming off island, home prices have skyrocketed. I pulled this off the web yesterday. Not atypical. So small apartment and rental house options, which are often the place where a lot of the local service workers have lived, those have become Airbnbs, or the homes have sold, and the rental availability has gotten really scarce. So the folks who earn their living here are scrambling for housing. And it's a double bind. Local businesses have had to cut back hours because they can't find workers, because they can't find housing. And the school district is struggling to hire teachers for the same reason. Essential city and county employees, EMS folks, healthcare aides, nurses are stuck too. So I've come to believe that the solutions are not singular, they're multiple. We need a range of approaches to try to make inroads on this crisis. And I'm sure in your part of the world, you've got other versions of this. I believe 3 sectors are necessary to make this work. 3 sectors of government, private developers, and nonprofit community land trusts working together proactively. There's no one sector. This can't be solved by the market. It can't be solved by the government. It can't be solved by a nonprofit. It's got to be together. Now, one of the tools that a city can offer is to expand the range of housing options. Missing middle housing is something that has gotten out in the world in the last dozen years or so, recognizing that rather than a monoculture of one size fits all, single family, garage fronted houses, a city can re-legalize missing housing types that used to be around often before the 1960s, certainly in the early years of town building in this country. So you'll notice bungalow courts is one of these. This is a development type that was started in Southern California in the 1910s, and in the next decade spread across the country. I didn't know about this in the mid-1990s. This is when the city of Langley passed the alternative zoning tract that permitted infill development. It promoted infill development with smaller houses around a garden courtyard, essentially bungalow courts. So this is an overlay zone that encourages infill development, which is more affordable and in character with the town. Here's the incentive. It allows for double the density of homes on any residential site it's got a caveat here. If there are houses that are limited in size, typically under 1,000 square feet, and the houses are oriented around a shared commons, and parking is shielded from the street. So with more than 60% of our town being comprised of 1- and 2-person households, I had a gut sense that this alternative was really needed. So I teamed up with a developer to try to demonstrate that this was marketable. There were no comps. There's nothing quite like this. In fact, I think this was the first contemporary cottage court code in the country at that time. We purchased 4 lots in town, about 2/3 of an acre, and then proceeded with a plan to build it. Here's what we did. On this 2/3 of an acre site, we have 8 cottages and a common house facing onto a green, and we tucked parking spots between the buildings to the side. The cottages were about 700 square feet plus lofts. And while there are no garages or carports, everyone has a storage shed. And in addition, there is a garden shed for the 1 lawnmower and the rakes and shovels and what have you. So let's take a tour of what we built. This is the view from the main street coming into town. Although there are no cars in the picture, it's a little noisy and loud. And so you'll see an opening. And getting closer, you'll see a spot to sit. There's a mailbox to the right for the community. And coming in through the opening, you come into this courtyard. When the houses were just being framed up, I walked with someone into the courtyard off the busy street, and I noticed our voices hushed. The cottages felt like precious jewels tucked into a pocket. The words pocket neighborhood tumbled out, and the term stuck. So I've been using that ever since. You'll see that we took we arranged this intentionally so that you walk from your car door to your front door through the garden. And in doing so, I have an opportunity to watch the trees as they come into bloom, see a neighbor, chat, just transition between the car and the house. And between the courtyard and the house, there are several layers. There's a fence. You can step over that, but it creates a buffer of personal space. The porches were not key-fumbling porches. They were rooms. These are small houses, but they also have a whole room that is oriented to the commons, as well as opening directly from the inside. And when you've got the layers, you can have a door that has layers. It can be all the way closed, halfway open, all the way open. It doesn't have to be a big barricade door. And then once inside, it's a place with a lot of charm, small, but a lot of charm. This eating area looks out to the commons, but does not look to the next door house right opposite it. So we've oriented some of the eating areas and the living spaces, the active living spaces, looking out toward the commons. At night, with the lights on, these are like lanterns around the courtyard. It's really lovely. Very intentionally, we have the kitchens with windows looking out to the common space. So this is a shared realm. So if you see a stranger walking in, you'll very likely be met. If you're walking in there, you'll very likely be met by somebody saying, are you looking for somebody? Can I help you? We put the bedrooms farther back and private spaces up above in the lofts. And so there's a place of public and community and engagement, but there's also a place of retreat and to get away. On the south face of the homes are most of the windows. And on the north face, there are no windows, but there are skylights to bring light in. And we arranged the property lines to be 5 feet away with an easement so that the salmon-colored house yard goes all the way up to the face of the next house. Here you can see the tool shed. And we also built a common house. And the common house is like a warm yet rough space, a workshop, a gathering place. You plant seedlings in the south-facing windows. You might fix a lamp at the workbench. Oftentimes, there's a birthday party here, meetings. We brought a wood stove in, concrete floor. And then up on the roof is a roof terrace with a view out beyond. And there's a barbecue up here. I mentioned the storage units right next to the parking area and the mailbox areas with places for notes for the community and packages and a place to maybe chat while you're opening up mail or waiting for maybe somebody to pick you up on the street. When we were close to finishing construction, we put the houses up on the market, and we were deeply relieved that they sold quickly. The buyers were active single women, empty nesters, a young family with a 4-year-old. So our hunch about the market was correct. What we didn't expect was the response after the residents moved in. Word about the project got out to the wider world. Knight Ridder published a story that appeared in 200 of its newspapers. It was featured in national magazines, on television. We received hundreds of letters, of emails, and calls. The community was highlighted in books and written up as a case study in professional journals. Other cities began to adopt the zoning ordinance that enabled the project. So not only had we proved there was a market for a pocket neighborhood in our town, but we uncovered an unmet need in the broader culture. So we went on to build 6 more pocket neighborhoods in the Seattle area, and have since worked with, I've lost count, it's over 150 developers on projects in every region of the country. We work with cities. These are small clusters of 6 to 8 homes to whole neighborhoods with 100 to 300 homes, to pocket neighborhoods for adults with disabilities and senior living communities with independent cottages and assisted living homes. After building a number of these, Taunton Press asked me to write about it, about the ideas. And in the process of researching the book, I expanded my horizon to see what other examples were around. What I came across was a far wider spectrum than I imagined, across history and across the world. In fact, I'd go so far as to suggest that pocket neighborhoods, in whatever term you'd call it, are a universal typology. They're not for everyone, they're not for everywhere, but it should be an option for every community to consider. They offer a sense of community nested within a larger neighborhood in ways that fit in with the character of traditional neighborhoods. So a neighborhood might be several hundred houses. You might know some of your neighbors, but you're not going to know all of them. A neighborhood is known by its landmarks and its character, like the red houses next to the park. A pocket neighborhood is a pocket of nearby neighbors who all know each other on a first name basis. These are the ones to call on if you need help, or if there's a need, they'll be there. They'll notice it. A next door neighbor might be going out on vacation. Not a problem here when you've got another neighbor to look after your cat. Or a mom who needs help looking after her kids while going out on an errand. Or an elderly fellow, when I visited him, he was thinking about getting up and cleaning the gutters, and his next door neighbor came out and said, Joe, no, I got to help you with that one. In a close-knit setting, we can't help but step forward and help a neighbor. It's what we do. Typical patterns of development have a public street, public space, and a private backyard, and very little in between. A pocket neighborhood expands an intermediate space between the public zone and the private zone. This is where children can venture out beyond their front gate, and their parents are not concerned. Kids can play in the commons with other kids, find friends with a circle of aunties and uncles. Elders feel safer knowing that there are others around. It's a space for nodding hellos and chats on the porch with friends and impromptu potlucks. These casual conversations might grow into caring relationships and a meaningful sense of community, all fostered by the simple fact of shared space. Let's face it, humans are sociable. We're social creatures. We gather naturally in small groups. This is what I call the scale of sociability. We love to chat, tell stories, reminisce, argue, laugh. In small groups, conversation is spontaneous. These people are all gathered at the table, but look at the conversations that are happening. 2 or 3 people to either side, sometimes across the table. This is the scale of sociability. It might be a conversation among the whole group, but possibly, you have somebody calling the whole group together, raise a toast, sing happy birthday. But once the conversation gets going, it's going to be within these smaller groups in a spontaneous way. Now, pocket neighborhoods are designed around this fact of our human nature. The scale of sociability is the scale of conversation. These are clusters of 3, 4, 10 homes, maybe 12 at most. These are clusters built around the scale of sociability. If you've got a larger development, the sociability continues, the clusters stay small. Even within much larger neighborhoods, the scale of sociability is preserved. I found successful pocket neighborhoods incorporate a few essential design patterns. We've reviewed these in my images already, but I find it's really helpful to name them. I've been working with a developer down in Texas, and he said, "You've got to help me out. I get all this, but I got to try to communicate it to the planning board or to the neighbors." And so what I did was put together a series of images. And so to talk about the scale of sociability, that's the ground for it, about the shared commons, about common buildings and gardens. It might be that all that can be afforded is a gathering spot, a barbecue, a fireplace, or maybe the group can afford a 4-season meeting room with a kitchenette, or maybe more. Certainly a shared garden, you grow food, grow community, and a shared tool shed. We talked about room-sized porches. This is a place that's not only part of the home, it's part of the community. And it's really important to get it located correctly. This is the one that I think is really key, layers of personal space, where you have a gradient from public to private. You've got 5 layers between the commons. You've got the sidewalk, the low hedge, the fence that you could step over, but it marks the territory to the private yard. You've got a porch with an edge to it and the room-sized porch. And then within the house, you've got active zones facing the more public zones of the commons. And farther back, you've got the bedrooms and other private spaces and the gardens and more retreat. So you've got a gradient from public to private. We talked about nested houses, about houses can be close together. Density has been given a really bad name, but it's density because the homes have not considered this pattern where you can be close and yet preserve privacy. In America, we live by cars, and yet the cars should not dominate the environment. Instead of streets fronted with garage doors and driveways, there could be lanes, there could be remote parking, there could be different ways to have parking come in, but have it be part of the pedestrian zone, the residential zone. Cars on good behavior. And then we talked about eyes on shared space and how important that is. In the planning world, we know this is classic. Oscar Newman, his Defensible Space book, I'm sure many of you know. So let's take a look at pocket neighborhoods, small, medium, and large. The first code that we put together worked with small infill sites. These are sites that are less than an acre lots. This would be infill. This is a first-ring suburb of Seattle, 3/4 acre lots. The house was built in the 1960s. And in this one, a family owned two of the small houses in the front, and the entire back was open. The original parents had passed on. The children were selling the place, and instead of having it being developed as some other kind of subdivision, what we did was to work with the city in creating a code, very much of a cottage code, and to allow for homes around a courtyard with parking tucked away. And so what you'll see here are 8 homes with commons building and garages here, and other parking to the side. So as you come in off the street, you're not seeing a parking area, you're seeing the back of the commons building, which has got a big solar element to it. You're being brought in, there's guest parking here. You hardly even notice the garages. And then you're brought into the commons, and you'll see the layers of personal space, the private yards to the south primarily, backyard retreat spots. This is an aerial view of it. I always like to include some type of calm center, some type of green. None of the yards have grass. They all have some kind of plantings. Usually we encourage low water use plants. In the Northwest, we have a lot of water, but we also have 2 to 3 months with no rain. This shows the kind of people who have been attracted. This is a birthday party here. You've got family, you've got middles, you've got active single women, elders. The house on the right, if you can believe it, it's 3 levels. What you don't see is the level that drops off halfway down. And there were 3 generations living in this house: an 85-year-old mother, this woman with then 2 of her college-age kids coming home for the summers. So they come home. So for a while, she'd have 3 generations in the house. Every Saturday, they'd have picnic in the garden, get together. And they often have spontaneous get-togethers. You come home from work, you've got somebody fired up the barbecue out there, and pretty soon something else is on the barbecue, and pretty soon you've got somebody with something to join in, and little gathering spots and nodes. Here you can see the south face with solar, the north face. This room is only 11 feet wide on the interior, but it's quite high. No feeling of being too small. Up above is the loft. This actually has a full stairway, so it is fully workable. And it's got a window opposite of me that meets all the egress codes. The eyes on shared space. This is the bedroom farther down, opening to this backyard little retreat garden. So here's a pocket neighborhood, not on a narrow, deep site, but on a shallow, wide site. This is in the outskirts of Portland, actually about 3 blocks from the end of the light rail line. So in it, what we did was to put together a series of houses from 500 square feet to 1,500 square feet with engaged street sides with porches, but also opening primarily to the court. We put parking to the side. There's storage, there's recycling and garbage on one end. This is modeling of what it looks like coming into the court. We have, there wasn't room for a big common house, but what we did was to create a spot for barbecue and a fireplace with a storage shed and bicycles. Storage is critical. You know, they may be small houses, but the need for storage is significant. I've seen a lot of people do courtyard projects and they might get the first couple of things right, but they're missing storage. They're often missing layers of personal space. They're missing gathering points, not quite understanding how cars fit onto a site in ways that are gentle to the wider community as well as within the community. Engaging the street. Here's showing the property lines and the easements going from one to another. So you can see lot 6 has a limited use area for the benefit of lot 5. And then there's some other easements carrying in from the commons shared use tract. So this is how that's conveyed. You'll be asking probably about, are these fee simple? Oftentimes these are condominium conveyed. Sometimes, more recently, we've been doing housing cooperatives. That's more rare, but I think it might be an opportunity. And now stepping up to larger sites, the court, the classic cottage code doesn't easily apply once you get to have larger sites. I ended up writing a model code for the larger sites. In this code, sociability is a central factor, and we can weave in homes that have access from the street, but they are porch fronted and they engage a quiet street. And so you've got a mix of types coming together in a larger tapestry. Here is another community where we've got multifamily, this being rentals. You've got a series of homes that are porches, garages facing a street, but you've also got a little court coming around a green with a common house with a guest room. And then you've got a cluster of small houses around a green, which then dovetails into other houses. You've got garages with a couple of apartments up above. So a real mix of homes in an area that works with wetlands and the surrounding neighborhood in a way that brings in a standard street, but also works with areas for parking and the sub areas through here. In a larger area, this is in Indianapolis, and the developer insisted that every home have a 2-car garage. So we obliged. That was his market. And what we did was to come in these little spurs, no more than 150 feet, so that we didn't activate the fire marshal's concerns. They have homes facing the commons, attached garages, got a range of house sizes and common house. This is a project that is very much in the works right now. This is one that will be applying for planning application here within a couple of weeks. Now, what we've done here is to take a look at 7 sub-neighborhoods, each with some kind of common green. And we've got city streets, and we've also got private streets in the sub-areas. The sub-areas will be done by private developers. We're working with the Community Land Trust to try to bring in affordability, likely to get to 80% of area median income on 50% of the properties. Within the property are walkways that are throughout the property as well. So you'll see a combination between multifamily, mixed use with Maker's Hub, small warehouses for incubating local businesses and for passing on knowledge from the older retired builders to the younger builders, a neighborhood hub, a gathering space. The builders, we hope, will be building a tiny house village. And so by building these, we'll be passing on the skills to the next generation and creating affordable homes. More walk-up row houses through here. And these are more standard homes with porch fronts to streets with a rear lane, around commons with community gardens. This is stepping up to a knoll with parking tucked underneath. And then a little lane that comes through here that has a combination between mixed use or mixed types with fourplexes, duplexes that are completely appropriate for aging in place and family-sized homes and accessory dwelling units. Much the same here with a neighborhood gathering place. And then at the corner, more of a commercial area for a preschool through here. So affordability is becoming more and more a challenge. Pocket neighborhoods offer one approach into this, I'm working with a group up in Skagway, Alaska. Now, they've got a seasonal deluge of people coming in, and off-season, very little, as you can imagine. They're right up near the glaciers. And what we did was to work with the people who own the local bus service. And they purchased a house, an old rundown house on 2 lots. And we worked within the code that said we've got to have, a house on each lot. But what we did was to say, they allowed for actually triplexes on it. And they ended up, after we proposed this, to have a congregate house. So we've got 2 houses and 9 households, often them for seasonal workers that come in. And so we've got a triplex with 3 building units, 3 dwelling units, 2 one-bedroom units, and 1 2-bedroom unit in a house that would fit into just about any neighborhood. And it opens out with porches onto the court. Nobody will know that the property line goes between. It effectively works as a common area. And then here we've got a congregate house, essentially, or what I sometimes call a micro house, where you've got studio suites, each with a little small bathroom, a sink, a counter, no stove, and the common kitchen is here. So they have a larger kitchen for get-togethers. You can certainly do your hot plate and so forth, but you've got a larger thing here. And then you've got a porch, a place for dining for everybody, and for living room space, and a laundry, place for kayaks and bikes. In our town, this house was purchased by a local group trying to solve the homeless issue. And they have a couple of apartments up above, a manager's apartment, and then a commons for some of the folks. And in the backyard are small house clusters. And these are each around a little gathering spot, maybe a little hibachi, parking to the side. We've got a place for bicycles, tools, garbage, and recycling. And these aren't little houses, but they're very small houses. This one has a main room with a fold-out couch. It also has a loft with a alternating stair going up to the loft up above. This is a senior housing community in rural Montana. And it started off by a group that was Ravalli County Council on Aging. And they were helping people to age in place where they live. And they found that while that works, at times people really need to be in more closer in settings in town, or they wanted to be. And so what we did was to, on the land that they had, to work with 7 sub-neighborhoods with both attached and detached parking, and homes that are not only all ground level, but also 2 levels, so that families could be here with a place for an aging parent. And as well, there are small scale 10 suite homes for people who need assisted care 24/7. There's Meals on Wheels here. There is a transit system. They've also got in planning, personal and health services through here, and what I call a geezer's workshop, a place that's a workshop for whatever, building, hanging out. So this is underway right now. The whole first cluster is built. I don't have photographs of it, but this is the model. And you can see homes engaging a more traditional street. There are no driveways off the street. The driveways are off the lanes. And you can see garages, and you can see houses with engaging porches. Primarily single level. This is the lane. And then this is the gathering spot for mail, for hanging out, right in the center of things. Another approach is to work with, many of you may have the backyard cottage ordinance, accessory dwelling unit ordinance. What we did here is to work with 2 large lots They changed the regulation for the lot size, and so we could then get 3 lots. And on each of the lots, we built a backyard cottage. And then we have a lane running through the middle of it. So everybody has access by car, but there's a lane right through the middle. It's not your classic cottage court, but it is very much of a community. Here's the backyard cottage. Now, in the last slide, this is something that's not a pocket neighborhood, but it's another kind of a community. This is the situation everywhere in the country. You've got these oversized houses with 1 or 2 people living in them. This woman owns this house. It's probably 2,200 square feet. And what she's done is to have a little shared room up above here and down below a small little apartment. And then she's renovated her garage into another dwelling unit. Now, it's currently illegal, but it's serving the community in a very minimal impact way. In a way, you don't have to build anything. So you can, if we can find a way, if our cities can begin to allow some of this, I think we can crack the nut without having to have huge expenses. And we can allow a person like this to continue well into her older years and have a place for people who work and live in town. So the, oh, sorry, one more. Pushed the wrong button here. Getting to be the last ones. As far as resources go, we put a pocket neighborhood website together. It's got a lot of information of things that I've covered. Video, tour, articles that have been written. There's blog posts. There's a post about codes for courtyards. And then as well, my own architectural website with a number of examples and access to some of the articles that have been printed around the country. This is my contact information. And if you miss it, we'll get it to you. So let's get into some Q&A. I think we've got about 15 minutes or so. If that's enough.
Oh, that was great. And do you see the chat that is going on? I can read them to you if you would like, Ross.
All right, why don't you jump into it? I'm trying to get myself oriented again here.
Okay, well, one is we do have a group here about aging in place called Life Care Humboldt. So you may get a call from someone from Life Care Humboldt. Nick is attending here. But the question was, are all the homes the same size and or floor plans? So you.
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, I strongly encourage for a wide range. When we first did it, our very first one, they were all about 700 square feet. Absolutely lovely, wonderful. It can serve a pretty wide range, as I mentioned, active singles, empty nesters, maybe a small family getting started. But I've found that a strong community has a place for a wide range of people. There might be an elder living in a small cottage. There might be a family. And so when the parents are still working, kids come home, and you've got a period of time where they go over to their aunties next door. And that kind of synergy between the generations is ideal. You've got people who are able and more less able coming together. In the elder communities that I've designed, I think that mix is also essential. So it's not just, oh, here's an old folks community, and that's just what it is. It's kind of even the sort of above 55 only. I think having a mix is positive. And it may be that you don't require it, but I would encourage it.
Yeah, and I noticed you did a transformation. You started with the cottages and then you ended with several examples. I don't know if it was the developers or the zoning regulations that you changed things, but there were some certain elements that you continued through the way you could.
Well, what I've done when we first began, of course, we were focused in on the cottage courts, and we did them in the urban areas. I mean, not directly in the center of Seattle, but we did them in the first ring suburbs. And we proved that they could be done in higher end neighborhoods as well as rural neighborhoods, as well as poor neighborhoods. We've been trying to show that they can be done in a wide range. Turns out that the interest is across the country and from urban to rural settings. You'd think this isn't just a West Coast thing. You might think it is, but it's not. I mean, we've got interest everywhere in the country.
I was going to ask you about densities, but one of the questions came up about what common regulations and codes are the most obstructive or helpful in developing a pocket neighborhood project?
Well, there are certain things that are obstructive, and that is every lot must have a street front. Why? Okay, no need for that. And I've tried to show that. We've got, the fire marshal has real important considerations. Answer those. And so, but they need to be done in a realistic setting. 150-foot lane before you need a turnaround. I think most communities have that. But the other one is to really take a look at where do you do staging to fight a fire, to bring in a ambulance, that kind of thing. What's the hose lay? And to take a look at the lengths of those. And then if needed, to allow for flexibility if you've got sprinkler systems coming in. Parking, oh my God. It's like, we think that the world is going to be perfect when we design for the car. And every house, no matter big or small, needs at least 2 cars on site. Think about where our parents and grandparents were. They'd walk quite a ways from their garage to their house in rural areas. And I think that we can loosen up the parking requirements, and I think we can free up tremendous opportunities, space, availability, affordability in all communities. We can take a look at parking where some of the parking that is, if it's safe and if it's available on street, have that be included to a degree in some of the parking requirements. Take a look at parking related to home size. Should a 1-bedroom cottage need the same as a larger home? Take a look at how designated versus undesignated parking offers flexibility. So if I'm down visiting you guys in California, I'm not tying up parking spaces up here if they're flexible. I may have one that's designated, but the undesignated. So parking is a major issue. We don't need a specialized cottage code, although it can be helpful. I think codes that have too much regulation, I get it. I've been on the planning board side and then on the design review board side and thinking, oh, we've got to control this. What's going to happen? What happens is that the incentives get wiped out by the hurdles. And you'll spend a year trying to develop this special code and it'll never get used. What use is that? That's wasted money. We're in a time in our culture where we've got issues regarding the viability of our communities because we've got to have places for everyone all across the spectrum. People think, oh, we only want communities for whatever. We have to have communities for all levels of income and for all ages. And we've got to, and then the affordability issue that's happening more and more and more. I don't know how your Northern California communities are, but you saw what's happening on the island. It's crazy. And so the next generation is cut off unless they've got help from parents. And that's not a strong community. So we've got to work with not only regulations carefully, we've got to look with, the parking, all those other issues. But I also think we need to be looking at how cities can be proactive working with nonprofit sector as well as the market sector and trying to solve issues together. It can't just be one.
Yes, how about, let's then getting to the density issue. And I know you started out with the missing middle example of the bungalows, but how meaning multifamily densities, or are there minimum densities?
Yeah, that's a good question. The communities that we do vary between probably 5 and 9 units per acre. The Third Street cottages that you saw were 12 units to the acre, but those had 700 square foot homes, no garages, and we were able to fit them very comfortably. Once you get above 12 units to the acre or so, I think you need to begin to take a look at having pocket neighborhoods with attached housing, attached dwelling units, stacked. And I also think having a community with a wide range of allowing the duplex, triplex, fourplex, cottage court, tiny houses within a neighborhood. I think that that's positive. We're going to try to prove that with the largest neighborhood that you've seen. I think that gives wide range of opportunities. So that probably overall with all of those, we're probably at around 8 units to the acre. So it's really not that dense. If you get into 15, 20 units per acre, if you get into higher density, multifamily, you will likely not be able to have, because of the value of the property, be able to have detached cottages. It will have to be attached. I want to say that it's important that pocket neighborhoods are not just cute craftsman cottages around these luscious garden courts. It's around the scale of sociability. And so you could still have a multifamily development where you've got these pockets of nearby neighbors coming together around some kind of a shared element. So you could have the higher density in that realm still work with these concepts.
Okay. Yeah, I encourage anyone who has questions to go ahead and enter them into the chat. Yeah, so it sounds like, I mean, the last project you showed was aging in place, it looked like, and that seems to be something that is getting more popular.
We've got 80 million baby boomers. And of course, we don't think of ourselves as elders, do we? We don't want to, have what our parents or grandparents had when they got shipped off to a nursing home somewhere. We want a place that is respectful, that honors people, where people who live there have a sense of purpose and meaning and belonging, who feel connected. I think that this is really critical. There's a book that, hang on. Okay, a couple things here. There's a book that is really important for me. It's called Neighbors, The Power of the People Next Door. And this is by a woman who spent years as a social care worker. And she ended up building, maybe 25 years ago, a community where she brought together elders and foster kids in the same pocket neighborhood community. She did another one where she brought together low-income folks with elders, and she found that there's a natural synergy that happens. And she wrote about it, and she wrote about the power of intentional neighboring. And so she's got the book, she's got a website. It's Brenda E. Hart, E and then Hart, H-E-A-R-T. And she's brilliant. And there are communities around the country that are beginning to follow up on her things. We've been talking about getting her in to consult on projects that we're working with. Also for me, oh, come on, where to go? You might know of the group called Strong Towns. And Strong Towns is taking a look at the strength of communities and where community planning ties in with the economics and the ways in which towns work well. And so how zoning oftentimes, if you cast down 20, 30 years, they become unviable once the maintenance issues kick in. And so that becomes that look at towns and cities from tying in zoning, development, and economics, and the viability of towns is really critical. They've brought that into focus, and they're trying to look at that and work with that. So there's a website on this. They've got lots of blogs. They've got a couple of books on it. It's on my table right here, and I'm reading it, and I'm trying to understand that.
I'm currently in the middle of it myself. But
oh, good.
Yeah, we have that issue, especially with our housing laws that are pushing denser housing in our rural areas, and the fight back from the community is the misunderstanding of fiscal needs of small communities to grow, but grow correctly.
I think it's grow correctly. I think it's growing in ways that have coherence, that are fiscally strong. People push back against density. They push back against development because development has been dumb and stupid and ugly, frankly. And I'd push back as well. But what we're trying to show is that development is positive. Think about development in nature. You don't stop development. You want to have something that has a rich diversity and depth to it, because then it has resilience. Communities without resilience are fragile. And in these times with fire and flooding and climate craziness and affordability craziness and climate migration, our communities must be resilient, and we must work toward that sooner than later. In fact, now. I'm seeing a thing that says, is this type of housing also possible in low groundwater or high fire hazard areas? I want to say that pocket neighborhoods allow for flexibility of planning. Whereas your typical development playing out on cul-de-sacs, if that's what your worlds are, actually is not very flexible. And they also are connected. If you take a look at new urbanism, they look at connected communities, not only cars, but also pedestrians. With regard to fire hazard areas, absolutely. And I think you could work with open spaces, you could work with clustering that and preserving buffers more easily. If you've got tighter density, you can also have big areas that are preserved as farther back. We've worked with areas where we've got flooding, where you basically have the buildings up on a flood plain. In my book, I highlighted one in Mendocino, and you might know of it. I don't know if it's on my website, but anyway, it's in the book.
Nice. Okay. Well, I don't think we have any more questions here. We're at the top of the hour. Ross, I just want to thank you so much for the inspiration of what you've been doing and being able to share that with us. And again, thank you.
Well, it's been, as you can see, my passion and something that I can offer. So I hope that it helps the folks watching this. And I think that we've got we're in the positions, I think, that we can help make shifts toward more resilient, vibrant communities. So let's all head on back from our bag lunch and see what we can do.
All right, it's up to us now. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
All right, take care.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.